Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode number 23 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series, where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my subscribers, and I'm going to break this review down into 10 segments. Along the way, I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then also identify some areas where there's room for improvement. During the review, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can apply these tips to make your booth even better. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for today's episode, we're going to be reviewing Andy's booth, and Andy's business name is the Wood Gnome. And Andy is a scroll saw woodworker, and very important to me at least, and I know to Andy as well, that we point out that he is a handmade scroll saw woodworker. Okay, so there are a lot of people using lasers, and my dad has been doing scroll saw art for about 20 years, and Andy and I kind of talked about this at great length, and we are definitely pro handmade scroll saw woodworkers. So just wanted to point that out to you. Hats off to you, Andy, for keeping the handmade scroll saw artwork alive. And exciting news, folks. Andy is based out of Suffolk County, England. First booth review overseas. We've done a couple Canadian booth reviews on the series so far, but this is the first time that we're hopping across the Atlantic and doing something overseas. So really excited. And Andy, I'm really pumped about the opportunity to review the booth. Very, very cool. A couple of really quick notes about his booth. He makes his own displays. Okay, so he's a woodworker, obviously, and the displays that you're gonna see, he makes them. So very cool. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, here's the first look at the booth, and what Andy typically does at his shows is two 6-foot tables. Okay, so this is kind of like his go-to booth setup where this is what he's going to do most of the time. Okay, so I would assume indoor events. I did not ask him if he does outdoor events. With this type of work, it is a little bit scary. You definitely have to, if you're going to do it, you definitely have to have the type of canopy or tent where you have like 3 sides enclosed so that you're really protected from the elements, because this is the type of stuff where you cannot have it getting poured on and all sorts of stuff with rain and even sun can damage this type of stuff really badly too. So yeah, like I said, 6-foot tables for Andy, and let's go ahead and just get started with displays. So displays is the first thing that we're going to talk about, and there's not too much going on with the displays. Okay, so with this particular setup, he only really has the one big display. So we're going to zoom in a little bit. I have a picture that's pretty up close, and we're going to take a look at this view. So this is, again, just a really uptight look at this particular part of the booth, and I like this. I like it a lot. There's a few shelves here. First of all, it's just visually appealing. It's very attractive, looks well made, very well crafted. The choice of putting the black backdrop on it is excellent. So very, very good decision there, because all this woodwork is light in color. Okay, so I don't know exactly offhand the types of wood here, but it's very, very light in color, and it contrasts with that black really well. Okay, so great decision there. Offers some verticality at the booth, and then just by sheer volume, you're able to place so much more out there as opposed to what you'd be able to place just on top of the table. Okay, so this is serving a lot of purposes for you. The color contrast is great. The verticality is great. To be able to put more product out there is great. So it's really doing a lot to enhance the booth, and not to mention, again, the fact that it is also a wood creation. It slides into your theme very nicely, as opposed to having, you can easily go out to the store or hop online and find some kind of a display that is maybe like a wire rack or metal, maybe acrylic. You see a lot of acrylic displays. Think about all vendors. All vendors should think about the displays they choose or create and how it ties into their booth feel, the booth theme, what's being presented at the booth. Your decision on displays is really, it should be taken into that kind of consideration. So great choice here, Andy. I really like it. I think you did a really, really nice job with it. And yeah, very good. Now I'm going to show off one more display that Andy will sometimes use. Okay, so with this particular setup, the two 6-foot tables, he does not use this display, but sometimes he will. So this is it right here, where it's kind of like a taller stand. And you can see it up against the table here. It's probably, if I had to guess, maybe about 5 feet tall, somewhere around there, 5 feet tall. And it looks good. He's able to showcase some really large pieces, and maybe that would eat up a little bit too much room on the table. Okay, so it's kind of nice to have these off to the side. And just strictly from a visual standpoint, it is kind of nice to offer up something that's different than just tabletop, 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 So this is something that is nice to draw people in. It gives people something else to look at, instead of just strictly tabletop stuff. Now, it doesn't have like any kind of a backing on it. All right, so it's like a very, very, it's basically just like a rod, and then there are like these holders, where he can put like his completed projects onto these holders, so it's extremely minimalistic. And a lot of times in booth reviews, I've recommended that vendors have some kind of like a backing, like we talked about with the first display. So here's a version of that display without the backing, and I think it looks a lot better back here, okay, with the black backing. So here you can see how the items stand out really well against that black backing. And then when we flip back over here, it's not like they don't stand out, but I just don't think you get that like crispness that we did before, okay? In a situation like this, it's going to be pretty much impossible to install some kind of a backing on this. And keep in mind that these projects are so big that a backing really isn't necessary. Okay, I mean, each of these items are standing out just fine by themselves. I like the minimalistic approach in this particular situation, so I just wanted to talk about it. I wanted to kind of mention it because, again, a lot of times I do talk about, hey, your display should have a backing, but sometimes, and this is a great example, sometimes you're actually better off with just, sticking with what you got, and the products themselves are not going to be outshined by anything. There's going to be plenty of attention on the items. So, yeah, I mean, Andy, you're not really doing a whole lot with displays, but I don't know that you really, have to. Now, this is a really good angle here. I wanted to show everybody this view of the booth. This gives you a really nice look at how this particular display is actually configured, where it's like a staggered step. And even if he has, like here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit further, okay? Give me a second. Okay, so some of these items actually are taller than, like, it wouldn't fit underneath the next shelf. You know what I'm saying? So like the head of this item kind of peaks up above to like the floor, I guess you'd say, of this level. So with the staggered approach, this is really, really nice because, he can still display this item and it's not any kind of a problem, okay? So he doesn't necessarily have to limit himself either by saying, okay, anything that's slightly taller has to go on the top tier, otherwise it's not going to fit. By having like this staggered step approach, there's a little bit of playroom there to have somewhat taller stuff on any level. So really great design. I just wanted to point that out, that this is a fantastic display. And let's zoom out now and look at the booth as a whole. Andy, I think I would like it if you could replicate that. And I would actually dig it if you put a second one up there. And the way that I would do it is, especially when you have your tables like this up against a wall, I think it would look really good if you see how this first display is pretty much to the edge of the left table. I would mimic that right here. I would have another one, boom, right there, and you'd have that like just fantastic, like symmetrical look at the booth. It would just be really, really visually appealing, balanced, and I think it would just look very, very inviting for people. Take a look at your, we're kind of talking ahead here. Typically, I don't talk about signage quite yet, but since we're talking about putting a second display here, take a look at what it does visually too. So like at the edge of this display, if you take a line and you come straight down, you're pretty much at the edge of your banner. And if you had another one of the same size, you'd probably be coming to like right about here or so, and it would draw like a straight line down to the edge of the banner, and you would just have this like natural balance, not only on top of the table but also like kind of coming down to your sign, and it would just be, man, it would just tie in so nicely, a lot of elements at the booth. So something to consider. Get as many items up off the table as you can. Any of the stuff that's flat down on the table, save that for display number 2, okay? And I know that these displays, you kind of have to stick to at least somewhat smaller items. So take a look at all the items that are on your booth that are somewhat small that you can put up onto a second one, and then leave your bigger open areas for items like this, okay? So like your big kind of featured items, they would still have really, really great room to stand independently on the sides. Okay, so there would still be plenty of room to do that. But to take a closer look again, a lot of small items in here. Okay, so a lot of these smaller items would look really fantastic up on a second shelf. So that's really all that I wanted to talk about on displays. The quality of your displays, in both situations, is really, really nice. And I think that you've thought it out really well. But I think adding that second one would just really, really help to take the booth to the next level. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about pricing. So pricing is individualized. All right, so there's two different ways that you can go with pricing. You can do individual tags, or you can do grouped pricing, where similar items are all put together in one spot, and then there's a sign that kind of covers all those items. All right, so Andy has elected to go with individual price tags, and we're going to zoom in a little bit so we can take a look. And I promise I'm not going to call anything a dollar amount in this video. I'm going to go with pounds. So you can see the price tags here. We got 20 pounds, 75, 3, right? And everything is very clear, so I like the approach here. The actual appearance of the tags themselves looks nice. I kind of like that they have like a little bit of a flag look to them. It's kind of cool, like with the little tapered edge, and they have like a nice grommet on each one, so that when you tie them off, they're a little bit sturdy. It's not just like a hole punch kind of, that's it, and you're probably tearing a bunch. So nice job selecting these tags. It looks like they're of pretty decent quality, and yeah, I don't really know that I have a whole lot to say about them. I mean, you're doing a good job with them. It's very, very obvious what everything costs, and at the end of the day, that's really all that you're worried about. That's really just your main goal, is just to make sure that the shoppers, in a very, very quick amount of time, can find out what everything and anything costs at your booth without having to ask the vendor. Okay, so that's really your only goal with the pricing. So nice job. I like it, and looks really good. Okay, so let's talk about signage. And we're going to zoom into, let's take a look actually at this angle and see if we can see anything over here. All right. And the first sign that I see at the booth is the payment option sign. It's always great to have that out there, letting people know how they can pay, and making it obvious for the buyers. Now, I'm going to come in a little bit further on this particular view, and it looks like you have a couple of handouts. And if I had to guess, because I don't know for sure, okay, but if I had to guess, I would say that these are probably for upcoming events that you're a part of. And if that's the case, fantastic. Really great idea. We can touch on this a little bit further in marketing, but I do like that if that's the case. And I think that's probably what's happening here. But as we take a look around, we try to look for some other signage. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, now, Andy, one sign that I would love to see at your booth is something that says scroll saw art or scroll saw woodwork by hand. Okay. And even if you put something on there that says, no lasers or, laser free scroll saw art or just whatever. But I think that is not only is it a source of pride for woodworkers and people who kind of have an idea of like what this field or genre of woodwork is all about, but people who don't, I know that you mentioned to me in an email that sometimes you have a tablet out there with a video that actually shows you literally making this by hand. And that is cool, but I also think that you should double down with a sign. One of the things that you mentioned in the email is that sometimes you feel like you don't have the room for it, but if you got the two 6-foot tables, that's quite a bit of table space to work with. And I think that it would pay dividends for you to, kind of sacrifice maybe like an 8 by 10 area. So this is probably close to an 8 by 10. And you could have like a nice sign, somewhere at the booth that says, all made by hand. And then that would be an opportunity for you to also include on the sign. Maybe you could kind of have like two halves. One half would say made by hand, and then the other half would have like a QR code or maybe just your whatever link you want to use, Facebook page, whatever. But I think that there is a little bit of opportunity for signage at the booth, okay, especially when you do something that I think a lot of people would appreciate, that shows that, holy cow, this was all done by hand. Like that's pretty damn good skill. So consider that, but as far as other signage, I think you're okay. I don't think you have to go too overboard with signage. Every price tag is individual. You have your payment option sign. So yeah, I think that is just basically one element that you should definitely consider covering. Okay, let's dive into marketing. And the first thing I want to talk about with marketing is the business cards. So you have some really attractive business cards going on here. I want to point them out. It says the Wood Gnome on top of it, and it says scroll saw artist. And then we see kind of like the cut of wood, right, as the background of the card. Really simple, clean, but it again ties into the theme with the picture of the tree, and it's just very legible, very clean, and reflects the theme. So I really like these cards a lot. Don't know what's on the back of them, but just as far as how they look on the front, very nice. I like them a lot. Okay, now let's touch on this front part of the booth that we talked a little bit about earlier, but you have these flags and it spells out the Wood Gnome. This is really, really simple, but so effective. And you did a great, great job of kind of color matching here. So I mean, the color of these flags is, I mean, just perfect for the wood, and especially against the black. It looks fantastic. I like the black lettering with kind of like the wood color flag against the black background. It just makes those letters pop even more. And even though these aren't huge, like the letters aren't really that big, the flags themselves aren't that big, it still makes it very legible. So big fan of it. I think it looks great. I think it is very tasteful, not overdone, and very effective. Okay, well, keep going to this portion of the booth over here, kind of like this right side table, and just going to want to keep pointing a couple of things out here. Here's the first group of business cards that we looked at. Here is another group of business cards, and then finally here are a final group. Great. I really like seeing this because I've talked about this a few times. If you've got, shoppers hanging out in one part of your booth And if that's the only place that you have business cards, well, then other people are kind of just out of luck. All right. So they're not really in a spot where there's business cards. So this is very well done, very intentional, and it's just good foresight and planning. So yeah, great job there. And finally, with marketing, we can circle back around to these now. And this is always a good idea to help kind of spread the word about your business and to try to get a following. Okay, so it's always a really exciting time for a vendor when you start to get people that actually follow you to shows. And that's cool when you start to get some familiar faces. This is one of the very best ways that you can accomplish this is to have your future events out at the table. Some people will even literally design an entire event calendar for like a full year. So during the winter, they'll book all their shows for the year and they'll design a really nice handout that has their full calendar of events. And this is absolutely fantastic. So, like I said, if you're trying to get people to kind of follow you from show to show or get a little bit of a growing pattern going, this is one of the best ways that you can do it and one of the most economical as well. Some vendors kind of resort to paying for ads or, buying advertising or spending money in a lot of different ways. This is a very, very cost efficient, budget friendly way to get a little bit of traction going with an audience. Okay, so let's dive into vertical space. So we did touch on vertical space a little bit before. So, we have the one display over here. A second display would be fantastic. There's a little bit of verticality by just simply having your largest items at the back of the booth like this. And we don't really see this kind of a setup a lot where a vendor is literally like up against a wall, where the table is pressed up against a wall. So it is kind of nice that you can just lean items back there. That's always a good resource, basically, to expand the possibilities of how much you can get out on the table. So good job taking advantage of that over here. And it is providing a little bit of verticality. But most of my suggestion at this point is to go ahead and just get that second display going. And that's really going to give you the kind of verticality that I think you need to get some of these items off the table and get them up and facing outwards, because that's probably the biggest thing that I'm trying to suggest, I guess I would say, is by going vertical and getting a display like this one, you're facing your items outwards, you're projecting them outwards so that, when people are walking by, like this picture was taken. Here we go. I'm going to go British on this one. This is probably about 5 meters away from the table, 15 feet ish. And sorry, this is this is just so ridiculous with the conversions. I think we're like the only country that doesn't use the metric system. It's beyond ridiculous, but anyways, we're the point is that the picture was taken a decent way away from the table, but yet, these items are showing up really clear all the way back from this distance. I mean, you can see all of these shapes and what all the figures are doing, and we're far away from the table. But yet, if you look at everything down here on the table, it's like you have no idea. There's literal like words over here. There's a lot of projects that are just big words and it's like just no clue what they are. So that's a good example as to why you want to use vertical space, not necessarily just to get height, but to be able to display your items in an outwards manner so that people can see them from a much, much greater distance away from your table. Okay, so then let's go ahead and dive into colors, contrast, and texture, a huge strength at this booth. The black tablecloths, the black lettering in the logo, and then finally the black backdrop here on this display. It is absolutely dynamite contrast with your work. Okay, so this is really, really fantastic, you guys. This is one of the best examples I think that we've seen of contrast. in any booth review in the series so far. And this is a good example to show, and I'm glad that we've seen it in this manner, because this is proof that you don't have to do anything outrageous at the booth. Like, you don't have to have really crazy wacky colors, or you don't have to have crazy patterns or textures to get attention. Just the simple fact that Andy stuck with a super super dark color for all of his supporting elements to feature his very very light colored items, that in itself is the attention grabber. That is like the spotlight. Okay, so again, it doesn't take anything really loud and boisterous, and you don't have to go down that road, so simplify things. And if anything, it's just going to make your booth inviting, and people connect with this because it's just recognizably good, like objectively good. So keep that in mind, when you're kind of filling your booth out. And if you're a newer vendor and you're kind of like, okay, I want to get people's attention, what should I do? I would actually recommend going, I guess I can call this like the safer route, but really this is strategic. Okay. It's a combination of being safe and strategic. Like, Andy knows that, he doesn't have to have crazy intense things going on, because the more you do that, like, you're going to reach a tipping point where that's actually going to start to take away attention from your items. So great job here, Andy. I wanted to kind of make an example of this portion of your booth to the audience, because I think it's really important to look at this and recognize that, you don't have to go and do crazy stuff. All right. So great job here. I don't have any advice with the colors, contrast, and the texture. Just literally keep doing what you're doing. You're making great decisions, and yeah, just keep it going. Okay, now let's talk about the strength of the theme. So the theme here is scroll saw woodwork, and I think we would really benefit from that sign that I was mentioning earlier, that have it read something like, hand cut scroll saw art or something like that, because just kind of going off of experience by being around my dad at a lot of craft fairs. A lot of times when I'm back there with him at the booth, you'll get people and they'll say, how did you make this? Or some people will think it's a router. So like a router did this, or some other type of woodworking tool or saw. And eventually he started putting stuff out there that says, scroll saw, and people kind of understand, okay, that's how it's made. And they might not understand, like, technically how it's made, but it kind of gives them like a head start. And it's nice too, because it's a little bit of a talking point. So, some people are familiar with scroll saws, whether it's for recreation like this, or, literally using them to craft something, or, repair something or work on something, So some people have that connection to scroll saws. And anyways, this is a really long way of me saying that I think that if you had a sign out there that said, scroll saw woodwork, that it could be a little bit of a conversation starter. Never a bad thing to get that connection going with shoppers. So other elements of strength of theme, obviously the entire theme is woodwork, right? So people are going to see that and instantly recognize that, okay, that's what this entire booth is all about. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to kind of, if you have a lane carved out and your booth is very well defined, I think it's best to stay in it. Now, some people can pull it off, where, let's just say, for example, somebody has a jewelry booth. All right, so like 85% of the booth is jewelry, and then they have maybe like 15% of the booth is candles. So let's say they make candles as well. Some can pull this off, but it is very, very tricky, and that can actually throw off the strength of the theme. A lot of times, shoppers are literally glancing at booths as they walk through an event, especially like outdoor shows where you're already kind of like distracted a little bit more. At an indoor event, you're pretty much just looking down at the tables and whatnot, and there's a little bit more focus. But a lot of these outdoor craft fairs, there's other stuff going on. Maybe it's part of like a big festival where there's live music or there's food trucks or a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So you're already at a little bit of a disadvantage as far as keeping people's attention. So, what can you do to really just grab their attention right away and keep them locked in on your booth and at least give yourself a chance to engage with a shopper or have them kind of enter your booth? So, that's something that all vendors should be thinking about, whether you're indoors or outdoors. Think about the elements around you that you're kind of battling against, and what can you do as a vendor to kind of combat that and keep shoppers' attention. That is so, so important. And I probably don't talk about that enough on this channel, but it's a huge, huge hurdle for vendors. Now, having a good strength of theme is really crucial to that, because let's say the example that I was talking about before, where there's a jewelry booth with 85% jewelry and then 15% candles. Now, if somebody's walking by and again, they're a little bit distracted, they're only going to look at your booth for like a second or two and decide if it's for them or if it's not for them. And if they happen to look at that 15% of your booth that has candles, well, then basically your entire jewelry booth it could be obsolete to that person. It could be, they look at that little portion of your booth. They don't want to look at candles. They're not interested in it, and they just keep walking. So that is where it's a little bit of a slippery slope and a bit of a gamble when you start kind of splitting up your booth into different themes. Now, when we have a situation like this with Andy, this is great to see because woodwork is all you got, and all their eggs are in one basket, and generally that's a phrase that's associated with something negative. But craft fair booths, that kind of turns that phrase around a little bit. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Andy, I think you're doing a good job with your strength of theme. You haven't veered off of it. You're not really taking any risks that, you don't have to at the booth. And I think it's great, so just keep doing what you're doing. I like the fact that your business name actually includes the wood portion of that. So, obviously that reflects the theme. Your business cards, like we talked about, so like your branding is tied into your items. That's very important, you guys. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people come up with like, kind of a cool name for their business, or they'll name their business after themselves with like nothing else in it. And it's like, okay, that's great and everything. And, there's nothing wrong with having pride in a business, but if it's just your name, like people don't associate that with something, like you're not famous or whatever, so like there's just no connection there. So these are I'm talking about a lot of little things. I'm talking about, so far in this video I've talked about like really, really like minor stuff, colors, contrast, and texture. Like a lot of people overlook that. And the business cards, the wood slice, like the piece of wood on the business cards, having the word wood in your business name. A lot of this stuff is kind of like, it's kind of considered like little stuff. So many people just focus on the displays and the setup and, like my price tags and all that stuff. And while that's great, it's like all these little things add up to like an experience. And Andy's built that out, and that's what we're looking for in a booth. I mean, you want to just have an experience for people to approach, and it's kind of like all encompassing. So great job. I don't know if I'm explaining things very well in this particular booth review, but I hope that you're kind of getting the gist of it, So yeah, again, I think you're doing a really good job here, Andy. And people that have any kind of interest in wood, I mean, they got to be stopping at this booth. I mean, you're presenting it well. It just looks really good. The quality of your work is really great, and there's a really wide variety of it too. By the way, I mean, you're a scroll saw artist, but you've kind of branched out into a lot of different like subgenres of scroll saw woodwork. So that in itself is really cool too. So good job kind of exploring that space within your theme while staying in it. All right, now let's talk about accessibility. And with accessibility, generally, I talk about a few different things. One is the actual safety of the booth. Can people access it? And it's going to be a safe experience. They're not going to trip over anything. And then another part of accessibility is tidiness. Do people want to approach the booth? So let's kind of start breaking these down a little bit. Now, safety, absolutely fantastic at the booth. I mean, this setup is very, very conducive to a safe shopping experience, okay? Because the tables are pushed all the way up against the wall, and really the only choice that shoppers have is to approach the front of these tables. Now, the first thing that we'll notice is the tablecloths. This is absolutely a fantastic placement of the tablecloths. Again, this is a minor detail, okay, but something that is super, super easy to overlook. Look at how the tablecloths are just about touching the floor, but there's nothing that's rolled up on the floor, okay? So you just have a really, really great placement of the tablecloths. Guarantee you that he's got a whole bunch of stuff underneath these tables. Probably boxes, probably totes, all sorts of stuff, but you cannot see any of it at all. So again, really, really nice job here. Now, for the other portion of accessibility, is the booth a complete disaster? Is it a mess? And do people want to come to the booth? And I don't see any issues at all. You know, there's nothing on the booth that isn't part of the setup. Okay, so that's one thing that you kind of look for. Like, do people have like a coffee mug or thermos or a sandwich or a bag of chips or whatever? You don't see any of that. So that is really fantastic. And people would have absolutely no problem approaching this booth and not getting weirded out by, stuff laying around. So good job with that as well. Okay, now let's dive into general use space. So, pretty good. I mean, this is a little bit of an unorthodox setup, okay? I mean, at least as far as like being in the States goes, or what I've seen from Canada so far. You don't really see too many setups like this where it's like straight up against a wall and then the vendors are kind of off to the side. Okay, so typically, we'll have booth markings, on the floor, and the vendors will be either behind or like inside of the booth somewhere. Okay, so it's a little bit of an unusual setup, but nothing wrong with it. I mean, I kind of like it. It's again, we talked about the fact that you can push the table up against the wall and you can use the wall itself as like some additional display opportunities. Okay, because think about it. If Andy had some kind of a stand that was propping these up, like the back of the stand, we'll look at this view. The back of the stand would kind of be like this, right? Where there would have to be like something behind it that would stop it, okay? And there's no way to do that. Like that particular display stand would be hanging off the back of the table and this thing would just fall off the back of the table. So he is able to put more out there because of the fact that the table is right up against the wall. So that's cool. That's good thinking on your part, and especially working from largest to smallest. If you have a situation like this where you're really working a table really heavy and you have a lot of stuff out on the table, go largest to smallest. All right, so have the largest stuff out in the back, up high, and then kind of work your way down so that it's basically just another way of doing this without actually having a big display piece, okay? So he's kind of done it here, like, check out this project right here, and then there's this hug project in front of it, and then there's even more stuff in front of the hug sign. So there's kind of like 3 or 4 layers happening here without using a display, okay? So, yeah, good job at least staggering everything so that you're maximizing how much you're able to put out there. But yeah, general use of space, I think, at least for this particular setup, you're pretty close to maxing out. A second one of these is going to help tremendously to. You are definitely going to be able to get more out there if you have a second one of these. There's no doubt about it because it's going to just free up so much down here. But that is really about it. It's kind of tricky with this particular setup. I like that you have your checkout area next to like your chair. So that makes great sense. I mean, just the fact that people would be able to kind of shop their way down your booth and kind of make their way down. And then they would get to the end where there would be the checkout area and you can take care of people while other people still have plenty of room to shop. Okay. So yeah, really nice. I think it's an interesting layout just being so wide and so narrow, but it works and yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, now let's talk about the eye test. And the eye test is basically the 1 or 2 seconds that somebody's walking by your booth. And we kind of touched on this earlier. And what are you doing as a vendor to get them to stop at your booth upon a glance? So again, I think you're doing a really good job. A big part of this for me is the colors, contrast, and texture. So again, just keep sticking to that. The black and the simplified approach, really wonderful. It's making all these items be the stars of the show, so that's always good. Um, the sign would be fantastic. If you had some kind of a sign that said, hand cut scroll saw, I think that would be good. And then coupled with either combine it or have a second sign that has like a QR code or just something that shows people how to get a hold of you online. Now, Andy did make it clear to me that he really, really focuses on in-person events, but you don't want to just rely on that. Okay, so you definitely want to have some kind of a presence somewhere online and try to build that up. Or if you want to go kind of like the old school method, work the email contact list. So if you kind of want to just stay away and you don't really want to get too involved with social media or a website or whatever it might be, I would work an email list then, and I would have that somewhere over here near your checkout area and have a clipboard with an email sign up sheet. And then that way you can at least again start to build that following, get people that comes to you from show to show. Maybe they tell their family or friends about you and your work. Just some way for you to build up that presence so that you're not entirely relying off of the in-person experience. I think that's going to help you quite a bit. But yeah, that is really about it. I mean, Andy, I know I didn't really dive into a whole lot of details on this particular review. I'm not sure how long we've been going to, but it feels a little bit shorter than normal. But Andy, honestly, man, you're doing a great job. I think just keep doing what you're doing. And I think he's only been at this for about a year and a half as well. I think he told me about 18 months. So with that being said, pretty good presence at the craft fair. I think you're well on your way to just having a really, really standout booth if you aren't there already. So keep doing what you're doing. Just take those little tips that we talked about in this video in mind. Check the comments section of the video too after a while, like follow up with the video like a week from now, maybe a month from now. And a lot of times the viewers have great ideas that I can't think of, during the review, and it's kind of a collective effort, so we've got a great community of people here. I hope people in the UK check out the channel because I don't care where people are from. I just want to try to, offer up some tips or whatever and basically be a non-biased person that can offer up constructive criticism. That's all that I'm really trying to do here. And I think the community on this channel really matches that. And everybody does a good job of kind of pitching in and helping each other out. So, Andy, it was a serious pleasure, man. No laser, dude. Really appreciate it. Keep that keep that vibe alive. And thank you for reaching out, and even asking to have a booth review done, So I really appreciate it. And everybody be sure, please, to check out Andy online. I got a couple of links in the description below where you can check him out and give him a follow and all that good stuff. That's always great. And if you want to get your booth reviewed, please check out my website, howtocraftfair.com. And I have information on craft fair booth reviews, which are tied into channel memberships. Okay, so channel memberships is a great benefit It's kind of like a super subscription of the channel where you get a ton of bonus perks. There's custom badges, custom emojis, member shout outs. You're going to connect on my website. So I'm actually going to give you a business shout out on my website that stays on there as long as you're a channel member. Printable resource guides that can help you with your next craft fair. You could submit questions that I turn into Q&A videos, and of course the craft fair booth reviews. So guys, there's a ton of perks to becoming a channel member. Hit the join button below this video to learn more and at least take a look and check it out. This was episode number 23 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series. To check out all the other Craft Fair Booth Reviews, click on the playlist above, and thank you all again so much for watching.